Hey y'all. I've been waiting for it seems like forever to do my year in review on books because it seems intimidating and I didn't really know how I would do it. I'm just going to go through my year in books. And P.S. If you don't yet follow me, I would really appreciate a follow on Goodreads. I appear in these two books. Well, this one is mine and this one is when I have a horror story. And we'll go to my year in books, which is, and I would say about 60% were audiobooks and 40% were physical books or Kindle books. Wanderers actually is a book that I find myself thinking a lot about. It was earlier in the year, but I think a lot about it because I really enjoyed it. And I'm listening to a book by Chuck Wendig now, Gentle Writing Advice, which I also recommend. The first review of the year was to a really awesome book, a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, which I would definitely recommend. It was better than The Fall of the House of Usher. I'll just talk about books that I really liked in particular, and books that maybe didn't work for me. And of course, all this stuff is subjective. Doesn't mean it's bad if I don't like it. Really enjoyed What Moves the Dead, and then I was on a kick of reading everything that Stephen Graham Jones wrote, and I would say that The Babysitter Lives or Lives Lives, I think, is was really a weird one and worth a read. I really enjoyed the structure of that book as well as just the cool story and storytelling. Rabbits and its sequel just came out. I loved Rabbits, sort of like Ready Player One, but like more intense or less like family friendly, maybe possibly. Will Haunt You, I hated and I didn't finish it. I always mark a thing as complete if I get like halfway through, even if I'm like, yeah, this is not for me. I'll mark it so that I don't go back to it. Grady Hendrix's We Sold Our Souls was a really fun one. Um, and then I got on the Josh Malerman kick. Inspection, it was so weird. And so Josh Malerman's writing is really unique. He writes from a voice that I enjoy reading. I guess this is the right way to say it. His voice is really unique. Pearl is about a murder pig, and it blew my mind just in how weird. I don't know what his meeting was like with his agent where he pitched this, but I could just imagine how terrible it sounded. Yeah, it's about this pig, and he like kills everybody. He like makes their heart explode. He's got these mental powers. It's bizarre and totally worth your time. Goblin was a beautiful group of six novellas sort of fit together about this town of Goblin, and it's definitely one I'm going to read again. I enjoy everything that Grady Hendrix and Josh Malerman write. These are no exceptions. Simone St. James's Sundown Hotel was fun. I liked Red Moon, and I had read the one about it was like New York 2165 or whatever, and I liked that um, maybe better. But Red Moon was like a political espionage thriller type thing that I liked very much. Grady Hendrix's Paperbacks from Hell is required reading for those of you who are horror fans. And How to Sell a Haunted House was good, and I was glad to see it on a bunch of lists this year. Stephen Graham Jones' follow up to My Heart is a Chainsaw did not disappoint, and I would recommend Don't Fear the Reaper. This book, Mark Whitaker's Saying It Loud, told me a story about the civil rights movement and the follow up to the civil rights movement that I had not heard before. And I have done a lot of reading on the Black Panther Party, and I've done a lot of reading on the civil rights movement. And this was something that was new for me, and it was really an important piece of the story. So if you like to learn about civil rights and about where the civil rights movement maybe didn't accomplish all that it had set out to accomplish and how people responded to it, how Black Americans responded to it. This is a really great book. Definitely recommend it. And Evicted, I think I read this because I saw it on a Pulitzer list. I don't remember if it actually did or did not win a Pulitzer Prize, but if it didn't, it should have. It was awesome. Basically, really good journalism about people who are experiencing eviction from one perspective or another. And again, I appreciated everything that we're seeing here. And actually, the Dead Are Arising biography of Malcolm X was phenomenal. And of course, National Book Award winner, no mistake. I really liked, and I was on this Black History thing where I was just reading as much as I could get at the time, and franchise was a good piece of that puzzle. Outsider's Guide to Humans was useful for a neurodivergent kind of perspective, and it helps me to think about why humans are like they are and why I am like I am, which is not quite human in the normal way. I enjoyed this series, the Jason Pargin, David Wong series. There were four books in this series, and I started with the fourth, and then I read the third, and then the second, and the first. And I'm glad I read it in that order because if I would have started with the first, I wouldn't have kept going. But by the time I got to the first, I enjoyed the characters so much that it didn't matter that it wasn't my favorite. These books were super fun, and I wouldn't have read all four of them if I didn't really like them. Rust was an awesome memoir. I'm not usually the memoir sort. I was finishing up my book that takes place in the Rust Belt, and I wanted to read the story of some new and different perspective about working in a steel mill. So I read this one and I liked it a lot. Temple Grandin is a must read if you want to know anything about autism. That should be maybe known already, but if you didn't know it, you should know it. The Historian, I loved, 5 stars. I loved it because it was a new take on the vampire story and that it was written in an epistolary fashion that was not boring. And I really, really enjoyed it. Exhalation, awesome collection of stories from Ted Chiang. I really liked all of them. The titular story, Exhalation, was really unique in imagining how like different beings get their oxygen and what it means to be alive, and a person looking into himself. Literally, all of Ted Chiang's stories make me think differently. If you haven't read it, Arrival was really good, and then well, this short story and then movie was awesome. Enjoyed Zoe. I feel like she's explained it several times how to say her name. I think it's Zoye. Zoe Stage's Wonderland was awesome, and it was enough that it had me turn immediately to Baby Teeth, about a child who wants to murder her mother, and I really liked that one as well. I reread Children of the Corn this year, and it was, it was what it was. It was not my favorite, but enjoyable classic. I reread Annihilation because it was so good the last time that I reread it. Um, I started reading Clay McLeod Chapman's books and have enjoyed those this year. And I don't love historical fiction because I'd rather just read narrative nonfiction, but The Atomic City Girls was pretty good, though it lacked a bit of focus for me. If you're interested in like the theory of history, John Lewis Gaddis is an amazing historian, of course, but this is a really short book about the philosophy of history. I couldn't finish The Strain because they use animals to create emotions. That made me mad, and I stopped reading it. I loved Sundial, and this is the beginning of me reading everything Catriona Ward writes. And Gabino Iglesias' book, The Devil Takes You Home, was a ride. And he won, deservedly, he won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Overall Horror Novel, Best Novel, and that's the Horror Writers Association Award. So it means a lot to win that kind of thing. So anyways, kudos to Gabino. He's also an amazing human being, and you should follow him. I read Unmask Alice as I was getting into the beginning of a Satanic Panic story, and it was worth reading. And it told like the story of the awful woman who wrote "Go Ask Alice" and the fallout from that. That was worth a read, and it had local value for me as somebody living here in Utah. Alma Katsu's The Hunger blew my mind, and the short version of an explanation here is it's a story about the Donner Party leading up to their disappearance in the Cascades. I think they're the Cascades, right? Where between Reno and San Francisco, that's the Cascades, right? Okay, we'll go with that. Stephen King's on writing. It's not the first time I've read it, but it was the first time I listened to him read it, and it was awesome to hear him read through it. And it's a must read, of course. Catriona Ward, Last House on Needless Street, blew my mind. Also, it took a story that could have been simple, well, could have been someone else's, I would say, like an idea about somebody who disappeared in a bad past and stuff, and turned it on its head in a way that I'm learning is Catriona Ward's thing. Like, just like I said, Malerman has a voice that I want to read over and over again. Catriona Ward has a voice that I want to read over and over again. Really strong on the character work. She takes what could be an okay story and makes it an amazing story. And like you might have heard, there are no new ideas, and that's true. The premise of a story usually isn't that unique, but taking it and turning it into something that nobody else could possibly have written, that is the mark of a writer writing in their own voice, and Catriona Ward does that. I liked the fervor less than the hunger, but I still liked it. I loved this little Haruki Murakami, the Strange Library book. It's like 50 pages long. If you've never read it, you should get it. And you should get a physical copy from your library. You should not read it electronically, because the physical object is the thing. Did not really love Bellingrad's Wounds, although I felt like it was body horror. I can't really remember now. I think it was body horror, and I'm not into that. It was well done, but it just didn't meet me where I wanted to be met with it. It was not to my taste, is the right way to put it. Really loved Be Dazzled by Ryan LaSala. Their book, probably the first book I would categorize as a romance that I read and enjoyed, and I recommend it. The Marigold was unique and weird, and had its roots in like old tales about what you have to do to make a building stand, and it was cool. It was very cool. Not scary, but kind of spooky detective type stuff. Reluctant Immortals was a no finish for me, and I recognized that Gwendolyn Keist was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award last year. And the thing that really got me about this, which is what gets me about a lot of immortal characters or like super powerful characters, is there's always a hint. There's always this suggestion that they could do terrible things, but they never do the terrible thing. They don't make me believe it. And I got about 75% of the way through this before I was like, this character is too frustrating for me, for what it's worth. Enjoyed The Outsider. Would probably read more of that series. I liked the miniseries, and that's why I read this book. Um, Francine Prose's book was useful. 19 Claws and the Blackbird was astronomical. It was very good. Bastarika is a master. Shiver had short stories, and Uzumaki was the novel. And I read about half of the novel, and I read like maybe four of these short stories. I'm not sure. Enough to know that it wasn't for me, but that it was good. Ghost Eaters was an interesting take on ghosts. Nothing But Black and Teeth was phenomenal as a novella. Loved it. The Memory Police is a book that I hope replaces Fahrenheit 451 in classrooms across the country. If teachers are going to, PS teachers don't. If teachers are going to assign a book for everybody to read, and again, don't do that. But if you're gonna, it should be this and not Fahrenheit 451. It's basically Fahrenheit 451 from a different perspective, but also it's memories and not books that are outlawed. and the things that memories are of or about, those are outlawed. Silver Nitrate was I don't know what to say about Silver Nitrate. I enjoyed it, but it was a little slow paced. However, it was never slow paced enough for me to not want to continue reading. I enjoyed the Spite House very much. Haunted house story, not like other haunted house stories. Rings, it was fine. I didn't need to read the next one after that, but it was good. I finished it. Cultish did not care for, and it had there's a lot of this pop psychology stuff out there that reads like not great journalism and not great psychology, and this is like that. I suppose we would say linguistics, but it was not really even that. A lot of generalizations. Split in the Vial, I loved it. I love everything Eric Larson writes pretty much, and he's got a new one coming out about the Civil War. Be on the lookout. Suffer the Children, I didn't finish because I didn't like how it was written, and that was just not to my taste. Dune, it was finally the first time I finished Dune, and I liked it a lot. Not enough to slog through the second book, though. Everything David Sedaris writes is worth reading. Neil deGrasse Tyson's book was really interesting and fun. I did not like Starter Villain. I'm alone in this, I guess. It was fun. It was a romp. I finished it. I was none too impressed. But I finished it. Again, David Sedaris, everything is great. His diaries in particular are my favorite thing to read. It reads, even though I know it's filtered, like he does edit it, it reads more like unfiltered David Sedaris thinking, and it gives it to you in short bursts, so you can just inject a little bit at a time. Really liked these really short these were like Amazon something special, somethings for the season for free, and I liked them, and I love these writers, of course, so I read them and they were good. Made, I enjoyed a lot. Worries me when we see somebody working really hard and then making it because it offers a kind of survivorship bias. But it was great. I read it. I liked it. None of you know this book. And it's time to have a look just because it tells this story. And if you're from Pennsylvania in particular, it's relevant, but it tells this story about how the Klan was making inroads into Pittsburgh, how the locals might have cast them out. Now it is fictionalized, it is dramatized because there's sparse information about this thing 100 years ago, but it's based in reality. And the Klan were active in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania, all the way up through the 60s and 70s. And if you're not familiar with the area, there are more Confederate flags in Western Pennsylvania than throughout the entire South, I would bet. I've done a lot of driving in both places, and that was what I came away feeling. This was shocking to me. Jeff Horowitz's book, Broken Code, I thought it was going to be just another Facebook takedown, but it was not that. It was excellent journalism. It was really, really good stuff from this Wall Street Journal reporter, and I recommend it. Cause, Food of the Gods hit me kind of weird. And she is an excellent writer, as I said above, but it felt like she had written this in these three chunks that the books are separated into, or maybe it's four chunks, but they didn't feel like they fit together perfectly well. It didn't stop me from reading it, loving it, wanting to finish it, loving the characters, but it did strike me as like structurally a little bit odd. The Militia House, I really enjoyed, and if you're into military horror, I didn't know that was like a thing. Apparently, it is, and I liked it a lot. The last thing I read this year was Paradise One, and I enjoyed that. It didn't hit me like The Expanse hit me the first time I read that, but I immediately was looking for what's next, and I liked the author enough that I want to read more. Dean Wesley Smith's Writing into the Dark was potentially the worst thing I've ever read about writing. Just really awful, chock full of nonsense. And it was like very cheap and it was like 60 pages. So I read the whole thing, but it was hot garbage. I don't say that lightly. So I don't know. If I were to pick a favorite book of the year, shoot. It could be The Hunger. It could be it could be Annihilation because Jeff Vandermeer's books are always my favorite everything all the time. Could be Wayward, or rather Wanderers. Wayward was good, but Wanderers really hit the spot when I needed it. Um, Inspection is definitely up there. Hillbilly Elegy. I do not like JD Vance, like what he seems to stand for, but I enjoyed reading Hillbilly Elegy. Rabbits was up there. Gosh, how do you pick, right? There was another, or yes, okay, Dead Silence was space horror, and it made me want to read more space horror. And apparently that's a subgenre also. So this year we learned that Steve does not like body horror, does like space horror, and does like military horror. Oh, hi. Hi, Nova. Good girl. Hi, Quinn. Good boy. Odin's way over there. Anyhow, this year was a good year for reading. I read a ton. I listened to a ton of books, and I hope you had a good reading year too. I hope that if you read some of these books, if you've got thoughts, I'd love to hear about them. I want to have a conversation. I always love talking about books and writing. Nova says I'm done.